Welcome to Saturday Nights. I am Monique Duson, and this is All the Things.
This is a show where we discuss all the things related to God, the Bible, and real life. And I am Krista Bontrager, also known as Theology Mom. This is also the show where we cram behind a tiny table while our set is being rebuilt.
You love it. You know you like being close to me?
This is very close.
Hey! Yes, we are close. We are close. I'm sorry.
All right. So helping us on this show tonight, over at the house, miles away, is the one and only Bob Bontrager.
Yes.
There he is. Oh, he's got his March for the Martyrs merch tonight. That's where our daughter works and does journalism. And Emily's pumping out the content.
More than me, but I'm trying to figure out, how do I live in the same house and I have never seen this hat?
Oh, I love it. It's his new one. He's got like a little rotation of the hats, but this is the new addition to the hat.
Remember that group New Edition?
No, you're younger than me.
Mr. Telephone Man. I think that was New Edition. Yeah.
I think I was in graduate school.
Oh, well, there you Dang, that's deep. My mom used to play that song. Anyway, okay, helping us out on the show tonight. Who do we have?
We have the one and only Alicia Moss. And, speaking of Emily Bontrager.
Yes.
She's one of the moderators tonight. So we are live for these shenanigans. So we want to invite you to add your voice to the conversation. This is the show where we actually read the comments on the live stream. So We always love to see who's checking in, and give us a shout out. Let us know that you are watching, and make sure to also share the show. Make sure to like the show. And even if you don't feel comfortable sharing the show publicly on your social media accounts, that's okay.
No,
we understand
no. Look, folk. Y'all gonna have to have a ounce of boldness and courage. Okay?
We're coming with the courage message already.
Yes, we're coming with the courage message already. This is what we're into. This is where we're going. We have had a year and a half, 2 years of the it's okay if you don't share it. It's okay. Don't be just secretly behind the scenes like, oh yeah, but I'm never gonna say nothing in front of my friends. No.
Don't be doing that.
No.
Okay.
That's just my own little take on it. You don't have to be as loud as I am, but she can have
loud. I'm sitting inches away. Okay, so what have we been up to? Let's talk. It was a big day yesterday. We had the big Supreme Court decision.
Oh, we did. Yes. We are praising the Lord for that decision. And now we are praying for states and state leaders to have boldness for their own state, for what they will stand for.
Yeah.
We are praying for resources for PRCs, pregnancy resource centers.
That's hopefully a show topic we've been kind of working on behind the scenes, trying to find a good one, somebody that we can interview about pregnancy resource centers and all of their important work. There's websites that you can direct people to, because that's one of the main objections from the pro-abortion side, is that, well, you're just pro-birth. Which I think is a complete
straw man.
But there's a lot of resources out there in different ways. Christians run adoption agencies, PRCs. There's tons of things that people can avail themselves of. And yesterday, just coincidentally, we got to have a meeting with Scott Klusendorf, which we were talking to him about a whole different conversation. But man, what a cool moment it was to be able to just thank him for his decades of work in the realm of pro-life arguments and advancing those and making them succinct and available for lay people. Because really, like, if you've heard some defenses of the faith when it comes to the preborn and defending life, most of those arguments that we take for granted now and use every day were developed and pioneered by Dr. Scott Klusendorf.
Yeah, I had never heard of him until about 6 months ago.
Yeah, kind of recently.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Bob's putting up Dr. Klusendorf's book, The Case for Life. It's one of his books, but it's a great handbook for responding to all of the common objections.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get Scott on. He apparently follows the ministry.
Yes, he does. I thought I was bold. I was like, you make me look like a puppy.
Yeah.
But
he's kind of new for you though.
Yeah, he's very new for me. I think I wish I would have known about him when I was advocating for abortion. But I almost didn't make the show tonight because I was responding to people on Instagram who clearly, I guess, just thought I was going to like roll over to their comments. You guys, let's just be clear. Like, you don't have to take it. You don't have to take nothing off nobody. And no, it doesn't mean we have to be disrespectful. We got to be rude or anything like that, but you can have clarity. So somebody wrote in and was like, this isn't about babies. This is about blah, blah, blah. Like you don't want to protect children and make sure that they have early childhood education. What does killing a human have to do with early childhood education? Can the child get here? Let's get the child here first. We don't need to talk about early childhood education if the child don't get here. And someone else was like,
one of the handles was my favorite. It was faith at the intersection of
WTF. Yes. And that person told me that I had a harmful approach.
Toxic theology.
Yeah, it was toxic. Toxic theology, theologically toxic, and harmful. And I was all the way, I just went all the way in, like, here it is.
She wanted to have a conversation with you about your toxic theology,
and to defend. She wanted to talk to me so she could defend why abortion is biblical. I said, honey, if you would like to have a conversation on what it means to be a true Christian, I am up for that conversation. There is no conversation to be had about why it is okay to murder, like to kill the unborn. Like it is not okay.
And you used to be pro-choice. I mean,
yeah.
I remember that being a difficult issue for you to work through, and still there's questions even more recently that you're still
the Lord is still
journey.
working with me. I don't think people understand that, I'm a recent, I don't want to say a recent convert, but I'm newer in the historic Christian faith. Progressive Christianity, I understand a lot of, but when I get clarity on something, I'm clear. That doesn't mean that, I can't be, convinced of other things. I think we have a lot of conversations. I have conversations with Elisa Childers. I have conversations and people who help hold me accountable to things and question me on things and say, well, you know what, this biblically actually means this. And we can talk about those things. But when I get clear, I'm clear. And especially if I have the word to back it up. Yeah, this is not a conversation for winsome convictions. I'm not that winsome. And so, yeah, I am sure if you follow our
version of winsome.
I said what I said.
I said what I said.
I am sure if you go to our Insta account, you will see the not so winsome Monique. And that's okay. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I am not.
That's okay. It's a free country. They can be there or not. All right. One more piece of house cleaning. We want to let you know that this show is brought to you by the Center for Biblical Unity, the Theology Mom podcast, and Family 210 Clothing. We actually have a new design to show the family tonight.
Let's do it.
Is one that I designed recently. Is I don't co-parent with the government. So
yes,
this one is my first Theology Mom design, and so you can go check that out over at family210.com and check out a couple different colors. There's a sweatshirt version and that kind of a thing.
I think it's such an important message,
especially for tonight's topic.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, honey. The government don't have no say to your kid. And you know what? Let me stop. Let's bring George on before.
So we got a big topic tonight.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about what options do parents have when their local schools are a woke mess.
Mm-hmm.
We get a lot of letters asking some version of this question. So we thought we would tackle it. We've talked a lot on the show about homeschooling, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that tonight. But what I want to let everybody know is that our two guiding principles in all conversations about education is that parents are in charge of their kids. Parents are responsible for their education, for their upbringing, for their discipleship. So that doesn't mean that parents have to do every single aspect of the education, but ultimately they are accountable, they are responsible in God's economy for how that is. And our second guiding principle is to advocate for education options.
Mm-hmm.
And so tonight on the show, we're going to introduce you to our friend Gheorghe Rosca Jr., who is working to help parents, particularly in the state of California, but now in other states too, to know their options educationally, how to even push back against some of this ideology in public schools. So let's welcome Gheorghe to the program. Hey, Gheorghe.
Hey, Krista. Hey, Monique. Great to be with you here.
Are you muted?
Yeah, you're muted.
I'm.
Okay. Hold on.
Can you hear me, Krista?
We're muted. All right. Well, this is
forgive
great.
us.
Forgive us. Well, this is us.
New setup.
Our antics. Okay. Welcome, Gheorghe.
Well, thank you, Krista. Thank you, Monique, for having me on your show.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here. I ran into you quite by surprise at Wilberforce last month. And after everyone...
And you live a few miles from us.
Yeah, just a few miles from us. But it was our first time meeting. And after the crowds cleared from around your table, I walked away with two specific thoughts is that one, you have a tool that parents really need. It doesn't matter what state they're in, they need to be able to get some of these keys to kind of unlock some things or understand the questions that they can ask in their community. And then two, I was just like struck by your boldness in being like, no, this is wrong. No, we don't do this. And it was just such a clear boldness that I was really thankful for it. And I immediately told Krista, like,
she came right back to
you
the
have
table.
to go meet Gheorghe. You have to, like, we had been connected. You and I had been connected on Facebook.
Yeah.
But so glad that you're here.
Well, give us a little introduction of you. Give us like a little 1 minute snapshot of Gheorghe Rosca Jr. and who you are and what you're up to.
Well, I was born in Romania under the communist regime of Nicolae Ceausescu. My parents ended up immigrating to the United States shortly after the revolution took place in 89. We came here to the United States in 91. I'm the eighth of 12 children. My dad, and actually we just were celebrating 40 years since he was imprisoned for the faith in Romania, and that took place a couple days ago. But we moved here in 1991, September. Grew up for the most part here. I was almost 7 when we came here, so I went through the public school system in America. Got a bachelor's in civil engineering, master's, MBA with emphasis in project management. Married, 4 kids. Been working at the same place for going on 16 years. In our local church, I get to support there as a pastor, and have been doing that joyfully.
Very good. And you are, as a Romanian immigrant, have continued to stay in that community and continuing to serve in that community. And it's a tight community. I mean, you guys are have a very particular experience that you've come from in immigrating out of a communist country. But I also think you offer, as from an immigrant family, a unique perspective on what we're going through right now.
Well, in Romania, there was only one option when it comes to education, and that was the government school. And so we talk about, indoctrination at the epitome level. And so my older siblings, they all went through it. My dad comes from a large family as well. He's the eldest of 10. So I have a lot of people just in my immediate family that I can talk to, that have shared, their experiences growing up there. But then also in our larger community, in our churches, plenty of people still alive that have lived through the horrors of communism. And so I'm really grateful for my parents, and especially my dad, for his boldness, and it's rubbed off on me some.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's what struck me about you. One of the things, like I said, your boldness. You actually founded a nonprofit called Protect Our Kids, and you address like a triple threat of what is coming at our kids through the public school. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. So about 4 years ago is when I started to dig into what's happening currently in the public schools. And then about a year into that process, I got to meet a gentleman we're now very good friends. His name is Mark Schneider, and together we co-founded this organization called Protect Our Kids. And what we tried to accomplish through it is, number one, our mission is to equip and inform parents on what's going on. And you can do endless digging because the teachers union likes to send you down a lot of rabbit trails. And so you could just spend endless time researching what's happening. So we try to disseminate it and distill it down to 3 things. If we could choose the top 3 ugliest things that are going on. So we've coined that as our triple threat. Number 1, it's gender and sex ideology, which is seen through the comprehensive sexuality education curricula. So no longer the old version of sex ed, but now it's comprehensive sexuality education. The second threat is critical race theory, which is exhibited in the school system through historical revisionism, ethnic studies. And then the third triple threat is social and emotional learning. And this is the place where I think parents and teachers get a little bit hazy on, is that really bad? It's not that bad, or it could be used for good. And so it's just a type of pedagogy that is being utilized in public schools to bring in a value-based teaching, but that value system is actually the worldview of critical theory and critical social theories, and not just critical race theory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you make that differentiation, because a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah. No, completely. One of the things that I heard you say is that in addressing the triple threat, you are looking at a revisionist history as well. Now, when I talk about revisionist history and things like that, I'm a racist. I, don't want the real history to be taught and things like that. So
You don't want to, because usually the rejoinder to, like, I don't want to teach revisionist history, and maybe we should even define what revisionist history is. And then, some of the common responses is, well, if you're not for revisionist history, what you are for is racist history. You don't want to teach the truth. You don't want to teach about Jim Crow or slavery or that sort of a thing. So maybe just break it down for us a little bit more as to what revisionist history is and what that looks like.
Sure. Well, I usually start off with saying an old Soviet joke, which goes like this: the future we know, but it's the past that keeps on changing. And that is what Marxist, socialist, communist governments do very well. They have to reframe the past constantly to meet the new narrative. And so they're just picking and choosing things from history that they want to emphasize. And so that's what I see happening with American history. I'm a big lover of history, and I get this from my dad. Even though, my dad grew up in Romania for the first 40 years of his life, he really loved history, and he had to, go through pain to try and get access to history books or just any kind of literature outside of what was allowed by the communist government. And so I've learned a lot of history from him. But growing up then for me here in America, I've always gone to the library. My parents, my dad, every Monday night took us to the library. And so I read a lot of history books. And one of the things that has struck me from what's happening today in public schools versus the things that I've learned, I think that they're hiding certain things from history today that we learned about in the past. I've never had a history class that hid slavery, that hid Jim Crow, that hid all of the things that happened during the 60s. I've learned about all of these things. And so it always struck me like, why are we going backwards and saying those things are not being taught in public schools when I went through that system in the 90s and early 2000s, and they were always there. So first of all, I always ask the question, like, what public school did you go to? Do you still remember the history classes you took? And please tell me, give me an example of where your teachers intentionally hid this history from you, because I never experienced that.
I think that's interesting. I know in recent conversations that I've had with young people, especially coming off of the Stand to Reason tour and things like that, your observation of, you think that, certain parts of history are being hidden now. I would say, in my experience in talking with young people, that there is some truth there, at least in their experiences, having certain conversations. They're like, well, I never learned about this, or I never learned about that. I would be willing to go so far to say that I think, even growing up and doing, I would say the majority of my schooling in the 90s, there were pieces of history that is only presented from one side. You know, I'll learn about, Marcus Garvey, but I won't necessarily learn about someone like
Benjamin
Thomas
Franklin.
Sowell.
Or Benjamin Franklin.
You know, there were things that I feel like are still not complete narratives of history. And what I hear you saying is that, a complete narrative of history is important.
That's kind of the position that we take at CFBU is, let's not only teach the noble things about our history or the ideals of our country, but let's teach everything, so that there's context, teaching primary sources. We often advocate and run book clubs, like, hey, primary sources are important. And that's an important part of education. But I think that what can easily happen is that there's a tendency to kind of skew one side or the other of like, we're only going to teach the noble parts, or we're only going to teach, we're going to teach through the lens of the 1619 Project, and everything is going to be viewed through the lens of slavery. And you okay over there?
I'm sorry, my earring got caught in my jacket.
What's going on? But I think that's the difficulty is trying to find that place of teaching truly a fuller picture of history. I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
No, that's very important. In fact, we have seen a lot of the 1619 Project making its way, not just in California, but in most of the blue states. And then even in the red states, when you look at the liberal cities, because what we deal with in the public school system is so much controlled by the teachers union. What most people don't realize is you could be in a blue or a red state. They control everything, everywhere. And so they push this thing down. Even when a Black scholar like, Robert Woodson would, discredit, and I think the world's top historians have come out to discredit the 1619 Project. Yet it's still being used. And this is the place where we really try to show parents that, look, even when the most renowned scholars of history are discrediting the 1619 Project, why are the teachers union still pushing this in your local school district? It clearly shows there's an agenda here.
Yeah. So your triple threat, the first one is historical revisionism. The second one is comprehensive sex education.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. And I want us to really break it down, because I see this as such a threat within public schools, even within private schools, and coming into Christian schools. Can you, first of all, just explain what is comprehensive sex education? How does it differ from the sex education that you or I may have had?
Yeah, so the left does a very good job at changing definitions. And this is an area where the definition of the word sex versus the definition of the word sexuality is critical. So I have to go back to 2006 when Planned Parenthood, the International Planned Parenthood Federation, actually came out with a guide called their Comprehensive Sexuality Education Guidelines. And in there, they have the definition of the word sexuality, which coincides in that same year, 2006, the World Health Organization updated their definition of the word sexuality. So when we think of sex ed, that's what we used to call it in the past. It was biological anatomy. That's all you were learning. But sexuality has a different definition. It means sex, gender identity, gender expression, behaviors, attitudes, eroticism, pleasure. It has a paragraph-long definition. And so then that's when I had my aha moment. When I finally saw that, I said, okay, that's why they use the phrase comprehensive sexuality education in all of their curricula. They don't define what that means because they go back and they rest on the foundational documents of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. And so parents, when they initially look at a board agenda or a school curricula that says comprehensive sexuality education, they're like, oh, that's just sex ed. But they don't understand the new definition of the word sexuality. So then what ends up happening is when they go and actually review the curricula, and when they see, pornographic images, when they see a bunch of crazy stuff, they shake their head and they're like, how in the world? I thought this was sex ed, but they didn't realize that the definition of sexuality is different. So I always take parents right back to that. And in fact, on our website, under our videos tab, under protectourkidsnow.org, we created a very specific video for this, which is entitled, What Are Sexual Rights? Because after 2006, when the IPPF, International Planned Parenthood Federation, published their guidelines on comprehensive sexuality education, in 2008, they came out with their Sexual Rights Declaration. And those two are the two foundational documents upon which CSE rests on.
Thank you. Now that we have an understanding of what CSE is, comprehensive sexuality education, versus sex ed, like the normal sex ed that we all went through, how does this show up in the classroom?
What does it look like, sound like?
So that parents can understand kind of, hey, I can be on the lookout for this.
Yeah, so it's going to be different from state to state, but in most of your liberal states, what you have is you have to opt your children out of this. So by default, your children are automatically enrolled in this curriculum. If you don't find your opt-out form that usually gets sent in the mail with 50 other things, then your child by default is going to be in this class. The class is typically taught by your health teacher or your science teacher, one time in junior high and one more time in high school. And so
you should assume, if your kid's in public school, you should assume that they will go through this. You're gonna have to be kind of proactive as a parent to figure out, when is it happening? So I think what I'm hearing you say, George, is don't let your kid participate in this at all. It's not like a little sexuality education is going to be okay. You're advocating for, do whatever you can as a parent, if your kid's in public school, to opt out of this.
Correct. Okay. Correct. And again, comprehensive sexuality education comes to you through the lens of critical theory. So what do they care about? They care about providing sex ed in the new worldview, saying, well, we have all of these oppressive, underserved, underprivileged communities, which are the LGBTQ really communities. So now we have to teach, homosexuality. We have to teach anal sex. We have to teach, how these, either sexual orientations or gender identities are expressed, how they express their romanticism, how they express their sexual desires. And so that's how you end up seeing it played out. You start to see exercises like, well, let's learn how to put a condom on a banana. And that has happened in many school districts here in California as early as 6th or 5th grade. Going on into junior high, you will see, a lot of pornographic kind of depictions, because one of the things that happened way back in probably the 60s and 70s, I believe, is that the teachers union changed the obscenity laws in America to where they do not apply in the school system in an educational setting. So a teacher could show a student pornographic material. That same material, if I want to show it to a kid, on my street, I could be jailed for it. So this is how crazy, things have become.
Now, one of our moderators, Alicia, she works as a facilitator for a charter school here locally. She's in our area, but she does, she works with families who educate at home. And so it's kind of a homeschooling / charter school situation. And she made a really good point on the chat. She says parents need to know their rights because not all districts will explain them to you. So I think this is a point I really want to highlight is, first of all, the importance of parents being proactive to go inquire, and you might have to inquire multiple times to find out, what the school district is doing. Sometimes the answers aren't easily available, or I have a close friend who is in the Portland, Oregon area. When she tried to opt her daughter out of the sexuality, comprehensive sexuality ed, the school acted like nobody had ever made this request before, and that there was no way for her to opt out. They literally were like, "Oh, we don't have a form for that." Like, what? And then, it just seemed very murky. Like, I think if I'm remembering right, like it was almost like the school just told her, well, just don't visit that area on Canva or on Canvas, the online platform, the learning platform. That was their opt-out program.
Yeah.
And but then sometimes we hear stories that the school sends it to the student anyway. So parents will have to be vigilant. My friend had to have a meeting. I think she and her husband had multiple meetings with the principal and vice principal just to try to opt their child out of it. So parents will need to have a level of proactivity in inquiring what to do and what it looks like in their district.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I would encourage parents to do is to ask your kid, what are you guys reading? What are the books that you're reading in school that aren't coming home? A couple of weeks ago, I went down a rabbit trail thinking about the comprehensive sex education conversation, and the childhood books that I found were so, I'll use the word vivid, or real, that I had to stop. I felt convicted as a Christian. I was like, whoa, because it was like drawings. So it wasn't like, pictures of real human persons, but it was drawings, of all the things and different positions, literally drawn out
for elementary
school students. I would say probably 5th or 6th grade, where you can see, like, I won't go into all of that because I don't know whose kids are watching, but or if there are kids watching, but just think of, things that involve positions or
things children should
not know, they shouldn't know this. And so, yeah, like I, as a grown adult, had to click out. And so these are the things that are, cartoonish, drawn in and things like that, but still real before your kid's eyes.
So one of the things that, for listeners all across the country, right, I try to help parents understand that every state will have a law about this. And it's usually called the Healthy Youth Act. Here in California, it's called the California Healthy Youth Act. Washington, Oregon, New York, and Massachusetts, they have their own version of this Healthy Youth Act. And it really comes from the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. SIECUS is the acronym. But this organization has been advocating for the advance of comprehensive sexuality education together with Planned Parenthood all across the country. So once you have the law, then the State Department of Education within that state has to give teachers a guideline on how do you then teach this, this law, right? So that's called a framework. So the State Department of Education provides a framework, and then curricula providers are able to take that framework as a guideline, develop curriculum, books, and resources for it, which then every local school district gets to adopt. If it's in compliance with the state law and with the framework. And so one of the things that I did was I read this 700 plus page document here in California, which is now being exported all throughout the country. And on our website, we have under the brochures tab an entire what we call our evidence package to CSE. And I extracted a quote out of this.
People can download it. I
People can download it.
They can download it, print it out. It's all the information they're going to need about it.
So one of the quotes on lines 1086 and 1087 from the health framework says this: examples for spiritual abuse include using spiritual beliefs to justify abuse. And what does abuse mean? Insisting on rigid gender roles. So for believers in the Judeo-Christian worldview, where we know that God has created male and female, and there are rigid gender roles and categories, we are being now labeled by the state of California as spiritual abusers of our children. And I point this out to parents and to pastors wherever we speak. The state of California now wants to become the Church of California. And they're getting into theology, not just their own realm of civic duties.
I see this is where we start running into some problems, because like we said at the beginning, two of our guiding principles, one of them is parents are responsible for their children.
Yes.
And I don't co-parent with the government.
Yes.
But people are not imagining this. Now in the news media, they're trying to make us feel like we're overreacting,
crazy.
We're just imagining things. This is just a boogeyman that we're imagining. But this is part of the active agenda of what's out there. So, all right, let's keep going, because I want to get to the solutions part of it. So let's quickly do SEL. Now, I want to refer people to an entire podcast I did on social emotional learning a few months ago. Our moderators can put a link to that in the chat, where I just give a crash course on what is social emotional learning. But this is how the critical social theories are being brought in, as a Trojan horse into the public schools. So talk to us really briefly about social emotional learning and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, social emotional learning was developed by CASEL, CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Learning. They are like, the organization that has put all of this together. And when you go under their website and you download some of their material, it really shows what the intent of social emotional learning is all about. They want to model a child's behaviors and values. And how do they do that? By centering their entire focus on, everything starts at the classroom level. And then after that, it goes to the second, circle after the classroom. And then the third circle after that is finally the family. So they have completely upended and turned upside down what you and I believe, that the primary caregivers and the responsible for growing our children spiritually and physically, emotionally, everything is the parents. They put us a distant third, and so they are trying to model that behavior, that worldview, the underlying principles. And so here's kind of how it looks like when it's played out in the classroom. And I think a lot of parents have gotten to view this because of, the pandemic and everything going virtual. And I got to see the same thing. In fact, at my son's school district, when he was in 6th grade, what the teacher did was at the start of every single day, they would log on, and the first 15 minutes was their social emotional learning time. Although social emotional learning is just, it's incorporated in every aspect, every subject matter, every category, mathematics, history, science, it's all dovetailed in there. But this teacher did, just 15 minutes, and it started off by asking a lot of questions. Very invasive questions. How do you feel this morning? Why do you feel this way? And then what does a teacher do? They start providing resources on how to, support a child, because SEL is very about supporting the whole child. And
It's almost like a quasi, I call it pop psychology intervention.
Oh yeah.
So the teacher starts playing psychologist almost.
They're a therapist right now.
Yeah.
And so they got to the topic of gender identities and sexual orientation, a topic that should only be taught under CSE and health class for those 2 weeks out of the year. But no, SEL brings all of those kind of topics. And so the way that they brought it in was, well, we need to celebrate our differences and we need to affirm our differences. And I've been discipling my son to know whenever these kind of code words come up, he comes and he tells me, hey, the teacher used this word today. So I immediately emailed my son's teacher and I said, hey, can I have the copy of the curriculum that was used today to talk about celebrating differences? So I get this 18-page, PowerPoint presentation, and I'm looking through it and I'm like, okay, these 2 slides here, they are completely wrong. No, you are not teaching my child this stuff. So I sent that back to her and CC the principal, and I said, can you please show me what ed code and what school policy allows you to teach this topic outside of CSE in a health class to a 6th grader under the SEL curriculum. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I get the principal calling me back. Oh, Mr. Rosca, we're going to look into this. And,
they're always going to look into things. It drives me crazy. They're going to look into it. All right.
And sure enough, I stayed on top of them and I found out that there is no school policy and there is no ed code forcing them to teach that. So then I asked them, why are you teaching that then to my 6th grader? And they're like, well, we're going to remove this from our future curriculum. So, I'm happy that they removed it for future, grades that are going to come through the 6th grade and do that SEL curricula. But, everybody else that was there in my son's classroom got it. And they were being told that if you're not celebrating other people's differences, you're just a mean person. You're going to become that bully on the playground. And that is so evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotta be kind.
Yeah.
I think too, like my friend in Portland, what they did to her daughter is they give her these, what are called health surveys. And when my friend inquired, like, well, who looks at these results? Where do these go? Because it's attached to her daughter's student ID number. So the school would know what her daughter's answers are. And, then it seems like there's the potential for, children to get targeted by teachers or school counselors, if they're having certain struggles, that they could provide interventions that the parents aren't even aware of or know that is happening for the child.
Definitely. There's, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So here's what's happening right now. So the amount of data that SEL curricula providers are collecting off of our children is absolutely atrocious. That is then being fed to school counselors, school site counselors. And what our school districts are doing right now in California is that they are now partnering with these top medical, hospitals. For example, here in Orange County, Chalk Hospital, very renowned for children's services, right? And they now have opened up a transgender clinics, and they are the ones providing both the therapeutic interventions for our children in our school district, and then these children become their clients, who then, starting off from the smaller psychological therapeutics, get moved on to further and further, where if they question their gender or their sexuality, then all right, well, we have the hormones, the hormone blockers, puberty blockers, and then getting on to all the way out to genital mutilation and things like that. So it's a whole kind of life cycle, very well connected.
So when you're saying that, kids are being tracked in their school and it's going back to their IDs and things like that, are you saying that, like if a kid comes out to their teacher, the school is not under obligation to tell the parent, like they're being tracked without the parent's consent or knowledge?
For the most part, I would say yes. I think the school districts would argue legally that when you sign the parent handbook, that that 100-page document at the beginning of the school year, that you released a lot of your rights or privileges. So I would say legally they always have ways to cover themselves, but I think ethically and morally they are being very deceitful and how they get to that point.
Would you then counsel parents that they train their children? Like if your school tries to give you a survey, don't take it, like opt out of it. And then that way you're discipling, your child to not participate in these kind of data collection situations because you don't know what that is.
Correct. So one of the things that I recommend is, and we have an opt-out form on our website when you go under the For Parents tab. But one of the things that we like telling parents is that don't just opt out of comprehensive sexuality education. On that form, it hits a lot of other things such as surveys and other questionnaires. And so it's a very comprehensive opt-out form. There's like Pacific Justice Institute has an opt-out form. Alliance Defending Freedom, they provide opt-out forms for all 50 states. Parents go to those websites, download those very comprehensive, all-inclusive opt-out forms, check all those boxes, sign that, print 2 copies of it, one for yourself, one that you will turn in for the school, and keep all of that documented from the beginning of the school year. Turn all of that in to make sure you're really putting your school district on notice.
That's a good segue to, how can we kind of begin to push back?
Yeah, I was going to say, I like that idea. I like the fact of, hey, this is in the parents' court. If you have a bold child, it's fine. Hey, you don't take surveys, and you can tell your teacher you're not taking a survey or you're not doing whatever, and allow your child to step up. But if your child is more introverted, if your child is shy, if your child is afraid of losing friends or things like that, we have to remember that raising our kids is the responsibility of the parent. And so we have to be a step before them so that they can kind of be removed, I would say, to a degree from the conflict, they can be sheltered and protected, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, protected from, all of that conflict. We can just know, like, hey, don't give it to my kid. Yeah. And then if they do give it to your kid, even though you have something on file, then you go up and you raise hell, and you're like, no, I'm not settling for this for my kid.
So
kids today are in such an unfortunate position because they almost have to be, very grown up to take care of themselves in the public schools.
Yeah. So let's change gears here and talk a bit about potential solutions. You've already started to give us some very good practicals of how you've responded. Lay out for us what you see, like big picture. What are the major options that you see for parents who have kids in the public schools?
So our first message to all of our listeners for Protect Our Kids is get out now. And that comes from decades of warriors in this field who have tried to reform the public school system, and everything that has been tried has failed, probably fairly miserably, since we're here at this point by now. But here's why. The teachers union is a 5 million plus members union strong. On the average, teachers are paying dues of about, let's say, $900 to $1,000 per year into their union dues. So multiply 1,000 by 5 million, you're getting $5 billion every single year that goes into teachers unions coffers. And so I'll just give the example here in California. There's over 300,000 teachers in the union. We have just under 6 million kids in the public school system. Every child is worth about $15,000 to the union. So when you pull your child out what ends up happening is the public school system loses $15,000. And that's when the teachers unions freak out, because over the last 2 years, we have lost 300,000 students have been removed from the public school system in California alone.
Wow, 300,000. So if each student represents, you said $15,000, that's a lot of money. Now, another thing that teachers can do who are watching this stream is go back and watch our stream with our friend David Schmoose from Christian the
Educators Association.
Yeah. And he's one of our partners, and you can actually change your union dues to go to CEAI. And so that's another way of cutting off some of that money to the unions.
Yeah. And what we advocate is, we say, parents, take out your children, get out now. But teachers, we need as many Christian teachers in the public school system to be the missionaries and the evangelists, and to hold back the tide, because a teacher within his or her classroom has so much leeway on what to teach, how much of the curricula to teach, which chapters to go over and things like that. So they can protect the children very well. But, Krista, Monique, we recognize that getting out now for 95% of parents is not an option. And especially when you're in some of these blue states where you have both parents working to try and make ends meet. How do you pay for private schooling? Or you have
a child in like a special needs.
Or you have a special needs child. Yes.
Yes. And so public school, is a in a lot of those situations a necessity.
Yeah.
So, and again, our two guiding principles, is parents are in charge, and the second one is knowing your options.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we want to do. Now, you've already given us some ideas about how to push back, some forms we can fill out, some things we can do to be vigilant. Are there other practical steps that you would have for parents who have to remain in the public schools?
Yes. Form a parent group. There has to be a bunch of parents just like you in that school district. So I highly encourage you to form a parent group, find a way to stay connected, find a way to meet on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. Start attending your local school district board meetings.
Yes.
See what's on the agenda. Look at if they have passed or not passed some of these curricula. So, for example, in 2018, when I started, looking into all of this, by God's divine providence, it just so happened that in April of 2018, I started looking into this stuff. And in May, the following month, my own school district was voting on the comprehensive sexuality education curricula that was going to be installed. We were able to bring, all the parents that we started notifying into the boardroom. We pushed back against the school district. We got it to not pass. They didn't pass the vote successfully. And for 3 years, we were able to delay that curricula from, going in, because we requested that there be a parent council that be formed, and that parent, group to start reviewing our options, how many different curricula are out there, which one is not, that bad, or what is the lesser of all evils, and things like that. So if you come together as parents and band together and have a strategy for your own school district, you can make things happen.
I missed that.
So another thing that I really want us to, I don't want to let you go until we talk about a very important topic, and that is another option that we're always talking about is trying to encourage, some sanctified and holy imagination on the part of pastors, to figure out how local churches can be a resource to promote educational options for the families in their congregation. I think that we're constantly trying to encourage pastors and churches that often will have property and a facility and a building
Just sitting there
all
week.
Like, what can we do in our local churches to begin to repurpose some of those resources. But the number one objection we get is, well, there's liability insurance problems, and there's just, it feels like for me, like there's all these obstacles to doing that. Yeah. And I know you've helped some churches in this area get started down that road.
You have a pretty cool model.
Yeah. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So when we started doing our conferences throughout California, this was one of the frustrations for us. We were going from church to church to church up and down the state. And we saw that, pastors were really struggling with, well, how do I do something like this? How do I help my parents and children in my congregation? So we said, you know what? It's very hard for us to tell them if we haven't done it before. So about 2 years ago, we started brainstorming an approach on how to do this and what would that model look like. And we went out trying to find partner churches that would be willing to pilot this program. And so for the last school year, starting in August 2021, we ended up starting 2 of these local schools in local churches here in Orange County. And our director of alternative schooling at Protect Our Kids, Tom Pollitt, was really instrumental to helping those local churches push this through. But it really comes down to, first of all, meeting with the leaders of that church, the elder team, the board of trustees, however the governance structure of the church is, and outlining a vision of what is possible within the local church that you reside. And we developed this guide. It's a little 20-page PDF booklet that has 10 very practical steps on what it takes to start either a homeschooling co-op or a private school in your church. Again, we ask churches to not try to take, take the whole apple and eat the whole apple in one bite, but take smaller bites. So you could start from doing just, kindergarten through like 3rd or 4th grade. Do a survey of the people in your church and look at, are there teachers or retired teachers or volunteers that would like to come in and provide that training. And so there's those 10 steps that we provide there. And sure enough, we were able to do that with 2 of the local churches here in Orange County. I believe we have 2 more that want to start up this coming school year. And that guide is available to download under our For Pastors resources under our website.
That's awesome. So people can get that kind of PDF, and it has a framework in it that they can share with their pastors. And again, we're not here to tank on Christians working in public schools. We see them as missionaries, evangelists. We want
valuable.
We want to encourage pastors and leaders to pray for those people. That's a group of missionaries that local churches can support and deploy into those very hard ground, to work as a buffer for our children. So if anyone's hearing us just completely pan all public school teachers, like that's not what this is, but we do want to empower parents to understand their options.
We got a question that came in and it's asking, can parents take legal action against a school or I guess a school district?
Yes. So let me give you an example. In California, the California Healthy Youth Act requires that prior to CSE being taught in your local school, the school district has to notify 14 days in advance that this subject will be taught, and they have to provide an opt-out form. So if you as a parent have not received any of that, then you have legal grounds to take action. There are many other stipulations in the law, but if you're familiar with the law, your AB 329, you're then able to take legal action against your local school. And so, for example, that could lead to potentially, if those 14-day advance notice was not provided, then that school either has to stop teaching that and give an extra 14 days, a true 14 days, or because most of these schools teach this topic at the end of the school year, sometimes then you are basically foregoing that subject even being able to be taught because there's no more school days left in the year. So if you know the law, you can get here pretty clever in how to use it to your advantage.
Yeah. Very good. I want to read Alicia Moss's comment because this is just, Monique and I are always talking about creativity and imagination when it comes to, being what we call a justice entrepreneur in your area, in your sphere, in wherever you are. Not everybody can do everything, but I love Alicia's comment. She, again, is a facilitator for a charter school whose students are homeschooled, but she says her big goal is to offer homeschool support through training and a co-op at her house or at her home church. It's a ministry her church isn't ready to jump into yet, but she's doing things in the meantime to prepare herself and to position herself to be able to jump into that, when her church is ready. And so I appreciate that. So we want to encourage people. There was a gal that wrote to us, I think she lived in Seattle, that she was saying that she started I think she recruited kids from 6 other families that she made a commitment. She would help those families homeschool this year. And she was a teacher, a former public school teacher who wasn't teaching anymore. So she kind of created her own homeschool co-op in her house and to make a way for other families. So be creative out there. There's a lot of different ways to do this.
Or consider Latasha Fields, who is in the South Side of Chicago, and she's been on our show before, but she goes door to door handing out opt-out forms to parents, literally walking down the street, door to door. Here's your opt-out form. And then when she's not doing that, she's bringing kids into her basement and homeschooling.
Yeah, she'll do it. She has, in the one hand, she has the opt-out form for the comprehensive sexuality education in the state of Illinois. And in her other hand, she says, this is the form you can fill out to homeschool your child. And if you'd like, I'll offer you 1 year of mentoring to help teach you how to homeschool your child. I mean, so there's a lot of ways people can do this. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, and the good news that I want to mention here is that as opposed to maybe 10, 20 years ago, where there's scarce resources, today, pastors and churches have access to a huge amount of resources that makes it so much more easier to actually start some kind of a support system of a homeschool co-op on their church site, or even a full-on traditional Christian private school. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other. There are so many different models that we have available now, and we walk you through those models in our guide.
Very good. Our final question for you, George, is even though you're working hard in the state of California, can people contact you at your website? And again, I want to give that for the podcast, which is protectourkidsnow.org.
Yeah.
So protectourkidsnow, all one word, .org. Can people from other states contact you as well for advice?
Yes. So right there on our website, we have the option to invite a speaker. Mark and I, just over the last couple of years, have done over 40 speaking engagements.
Wow.
We've done conferences at churches that have ranged from like 3-hour long, very in-depth conferences, getting into the practical stuff that parents can be doing, to just very short, 45-minute presentations. One of the things that I've experienced over and over is, regardless of how short or how long, after the conference is where we really see that parents, when they hear this for the first time, they have so many questions, and we end up spending more time after the conference, one-on-one with parents in line at the table, than we do in the conference itself. So yes, you could contact us on our website. We are happy to come to wherever you are at, wherever state you're at. We've done speaking engagements, Washington, Oregon, here in California, in Arizona, and Louisiana, Florida, all over the place.
Okay,
right.
great. I think we're gonna I just want to say thank you, Gheorghe, for all of your work. May the Lord multiply your ministry and continue to strengthen you as you are working to help encourage parents. Thank you so much for all you're doing. I know that based on the comments that we've seen, there's a lot of good engagement here. So I know people really appreciated the message. And so once again, we want to encourage people to contact protectourkidsnow.org.
And share this interview with your pastors, with your friends, so that people can become connected with Gheorghe and aware of his work, but also so that they can be aware of what's happening in schools.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless. Bye.
Okay, everyone, we're going to hear from our friends at Impact 360. And then we're going to come back and talk about or what are we going to talk about? Are we talking about What is a Woman? Or are we talking about Eve in Exile?
I thought we were talking about What is a Woman.
I thought we were talking about Eve in Exile.
Oh my gosh. We'll
talk. We'll draw straws.
Figure ourselves out.
One of them. We'll be talking about women because this is a show where we know how to define a woman.
Yes, it
is.
We'll
be right back.
Everywhere I looked, everything I read, all the things the world told me about who I was, what I should like, it was all there. The thinking had been done for me.
But what if you can't shake the feeling that you are destined to be something else? Someone else.
Someone other than just popular.
Or unpopular.
The smart one.
The jock.
The Christian.
The sinner.
In the world today, how does anybody know who?
Or what to be?
Or what to even know? I found those answers and more.
I learned how to think through the superficial problems and transcendent issues before me.
And begin to understand what God has revealed. And why faith is not blind.
What I believe in my heart from my experiences.
To know and respond to endless challenges of my faith with love and with confidence.
So that I may listen and engage. Because I know what I believe is true. A community where you are transformed in your character as you discover your identity in Christ.
And your God-given calling. It's not only who you are, but where you should be.
A community where you are cultivated as a leader.
Where you will learn how to live a life of service to others as you follow Jesus Christ.
The Impact 360 Institute is a community of experiential and holistic learning where you develop confidence in what you have always believed in your heart to be the truth. Then take what you know about God and what you know about yourself and live as an agent of change in your own community.
Know Jesus more deeply.
Be transformed in your character.
Live a life of kingdom influence.
Know, be, live.
All right.
And once again, we want to encourage you to check out our friends at Impact 360 and all of the fine work that they are doing and see whether that might be some people that could be helpful to you in partnering with you as a parent in the discipleship of your young person. We're going to be there in a few weeks.
Yes.
Speaking at the summer camp.
Yes. Worldview education is so important. Having a young person to have a healthy worldview and a worldview that they understand.
I remember when you discovered what a worldview is.
No, don't start with me. Please don't start with me.
Okay. So we're going to talk about Eve in Exile.
Yes, because we've both seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen Matt Walsh's What is a Woman, but she hasn't.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. So we're going to talk about Eve in Exile, but I do want to let you know that my daughter, Emily Bontrager, is coming out with some comments and a review on What is a Woman on the Center for Biblical Unity website on Tuesday.
Yes.
So you will want to check that out. She has a very thoughtful perspective as a young person, and she had a lot of great comments about the film. So you can watch for that to drop on Tuesday. Okay, so Eve in Exile, set up some context here. Eve in Exile is produced by Canon Press. It's
Canon Plus.
It's on the Canon Plus app.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to watch it, you have to go download the Canon Plus app, and then you can buy a month, or there's a coupon code floating around on the internet where you can just, I think, watch the documentary for like 99 cents or something.
I use the code Eve99 if you want to watch
just put it out there. All right. Everybody.
You can Google it. It's public information.
Okay.
I'm just saving you a step.
So Eve in Exile is the Canon Press people are affiliated with Doug Wilson, who is a longtime pastor, and he's up in Moscow, Idaho, and he has a church up there called Christ Church. And I understand all the controversies about Doug Wilson's theology, and we're not going to get into that. That's not what this is.
This is not a promotion of Eve in Exile or Doug Wilson. This is just our thoughts on it. We are not saying, please go follow this man. We are not saying go follow Rebecca Merkel. We are just giving you our thoughts about a
documentary.
Yes.
So don't write
in.
Yeah.
You encourage me. We ain't encourage you to do nothing. You better ask the Lord and
read your Bible.
Yeah. Do likewise.
Yeah.
But,
Okay. So Rebecca Merkel, who is the author of the book, Eve in Exile, which I have listened to the audio version of the book now after watching the documentary twice. Rebecca Merkel is Doug Wilson's oldest daughter. And so she wrote a book a few years ago. I think it came out in 2018. And now this documentary is based on the book.
Okay.
And basically the first third of the book, it's kind of a book in three movements. The first third of the book is her making her case that feminism was a scam. And she goes through the different waves of feminism. What she calls proto-feminism, and then first wave feminism, which is more like Susan B. Anthony and Katie Stanton, and then second wave feminism in the 60s of the feminine mystique and the rise of abortion, and then kind of whatever wave we're in now where we can't even define a woman. So I think that's the real strength of the book, is the historical survey, and that's in the documentary as well.
Yeah.
So
I thought it was helpful to kind of go back and see the movements of feminism and how we got to the moment that we're in right now. Like, it wasn't by accident, people. You can actually trace these thoughts back through history.
Okay. So to me, in the documentary, that was the most helpful part.
Yes.
Was the historical discussion. And kind of interesting, like Mary Shelley and the author of Frankenstein, and kind of her connection to proto-feminism, but I won't go into that. That was sort of interesting side tangent, but I thought that was really the strength of both the book and the documentary. Okay, now the second movement is looking at the creation mandate, and she boils it down to 4 words. It's like fill, which is related to fill the earth, subdue the earth.
I don't remember none of this. Go ahead. Yeah. Maybe it was in the book and not the documentary. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it was in the documentary
too.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. I forget what the other 2 words were. If somebody has the table of contents, you can put them in the chat. But there's basically 4 words that she boils the creation mandate in Genesis 1 down to.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book part of it, that's kind of the theology section. And there really wasn't much I disagreed with her there. Mm-hmm. In the book. I thought she laid out most of the theology in a way that I was like, yeah, I think I would generally agree with that. And, it wasn't overly problematic. I think what's interesting and becomes a little bit more controversial is in the third movement of the book, where she starts to apply these things and build out her vision for what womanhood, biblical womanhood is, according to her.
According to her, I think it's easy to take her version or vision for biblical womanhood, because in the documentary she's like rebuilding her house, like everything is surrounding her home. Like
she's painting a bookcase, she's baking bread, she's in her garden.
Part of the documentary looks at what does it mean to be a woman. What is femininity? How are you expressing your femininity in your home? That the woman's place isn't necessarily in the home. Like you're fine to get a job. Like she's not disputing that you can work outside or things like that. But before you focus on a career or anything like that, you're focusing on your home. Which
Emily's helping us here. The 4 words were subdue, fill, help, and glorify.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Which I don't disagree with. I don't disagree. Like if you are a parent, I believe that your focus should first be on God, your marriage, your family, kids, and things like that. And, what does that look like in the home where everyone lives? Yeah. I think in the third movement, though, what happens is that she gave her depiction of what that looks like. And a lot of people have taken that as being what she's saying for all women. Yeah. I don't know that that's true, though. I don't know that she's saying every woman, if you want to be a biblical woman, which she might be saying, I could be wrong. If you want to be a biblical woman, you need to be home, making sure that your home looks good for your husband, making sure that the bookshelves are painted, making sure that you're baking fresh bread and, you're in the garden and all of those kind of things. I think that's her life and how she expresses her womanhood or femininity or whatever for her family through that.
Yeah, I think that, a couple of things. One where I would agree with her, and I think she raises a very thoughtful point, is that a biblical vision of womanhood is that women are created for procreation. Mm-hmm. Like we're reminded of that every month as we have our monthly cycle, that we are created and designed for procreation. And so she's really confronting this idea that's growing in popularity in our culture that we can, and that feminism played into, especially, almost from the beginning is her argument of separating procreation from sex. Like, that these are two different things. So this is why feminists advocate for abortion and birth control, and because it's about separating procreation from sex. And so the idea of feminism in Merkel's mind is kind of one of the core ideas, is that women should get out of the home and work. That will be the cure for the boredom that so many women feel with motherhood. And that by controlling reproduction, they are able then to have more options for their life. This is kind of her big theme of the problem and the scam of feminism. I actually agree with this to some degree, because I do think that feminism does put forward a narrative often that if we are bored with motherhood, that working will solve that boredom. That is kind of the propaganda that the feminists put out there. And I don't think it's a controversial point. I think most feminists would agree that that is their project, is to separate procreation from sex. And so if we're going to think about things biblically, we have to wrestle with bringing, I think, those two things back together. And so the idea of being a woman and being a married couple in particular, and just not being open to children at all, because you just want to live your life. Now, if God calls you to a very specific ministry or something of that nature, those are exceptions. But just as a general rule, like the rise of I'm just going to opt out of marriage, or I'm just going to opt out of children,
Mm-hmm.
not for ministry purposes, but just like, I'm not even just going to be open to it. I think Rebecca Merkel raises a very thoughtful point about how that's really not a biblical position.
Yes.
And so that's really where I think I would agree with her in principle, because children are an interruption to your life. I mean, when I had a child, my education stopped, and my daughter is on this, and I love her, and that was a wonderful interruption. It was the interruption that God knew that I needed, because I was on a wrong path. And so there was a trust that for me developed as a result of that. And she was definitely the interruption that I needed. But children are an interruption.
You got notes?
Yeah, for most women, that, you know, if you're on a career path, you will have to have your career take a back seat. And so for, I don't know, the first 15, 16 years or so, you know, I was working part-time, and I think this is Rebecca Merkel's second point, is that the woman should be oriented toward the home. She's not against women working. She just doesn't want Christian women to buy into the scam that motherhood is boring.
Or that it robs you.
Yeah.
And you are to some degree now deficient because you are a mother.
Yeah. So I think that I appreciate that she's willing to have this question, this conversation, you know, and I think that we can acknowledge that children are an interruption, but we can also, as women, trust the Lord in his provision of those children for us and the role that they might play in our sanctification. And if our attitude is that we are bored with motherhood, that might be an indication of something else going wrong, you know, for us, that we need to look at or have a conversation with the Lord about, or something. Yeah. You know, but so I don't know. Those are some of the areas where I agree with her. But I do appreciate that Merkel highlights the issue, that this idea that motherhood should be voluntary. And this is why birth control and abortion are so critical to the feminist vision for women. This is how they define freedom. I think we're right in that discussion right now with the abortion conversation of, you know, all of this phraseology of you're forcing me to have a child. And well, it goes right into and back to the feminist scam that they want to invite us into on that. So it's a very countercultural message. Now, the parts of it that you were alerting to earlier of you know, Merkel's particular vision and the whole backdrop that she uses of the house renovations. Okay, I'm just going to be totally honest. Like, I am not a creative person in that way. I love what she says, though, about even for single women to think about and reflect on how God has uniquely created you. What is the talents and gifts that you have? And I
appreciate that she doesn't define femininity as being tea parties and little, you know, turn of the century little. I cannot even like for me that would never work. All the little fancy teacups and like that is for I grew up in a church, not grew up, but when I was saved, that was kind of like the ideal of, you know, a women's ministry event. It was the Victorian things and all of that. And to me, I didn't fit into that. And so I was glad to see that she was saying there are other options available. Yeah. It doesn't have to be this. She wasn't, you know, prancing around in high heels and a pencil skirt. That would be my version to me. But that there is room to express who you are and how God has created you.
And I appreciated that she included single women in that vision. It wasn't just, well, you're only a valid woman if you have children or if you're married.
Because that's a lot of the conversation that I see in the church today of like, we don't really talk to the single people.
Yeah. And I appreciated that. And that it was more about like looking at your gifting, your calling, and then how can you be a creative blessing, I think is the word she used, to others. So if you really love hospitality and you're single, maybe, if God gives you means, then you open your home or your apartment up to others to be hospitable to them. So how can you be a blessing to them? For me, if I was defining the outward appearance, the external trappings of womanhood, and I was trying to be like Rebecca Merkel, who is obviously very creative and in her home and her decoration, and I bless that. I admire that in women, but that's not me. Like I'm not gifted in that way. But I didn't get the feeling that she was saying this is what all women must do. Now, I had another friend who watched it, and that was kind of how she interpreted the whole home remodeling backdrop, that was Rebecca Merkel's vision for all women, is all you can do is decorate your house and bake bread. I didn't take it that way. I felt like what she was saying is this is how she does it, but that there was freedom for women to explore that with the Lord, to figure out how can I build a home and in a way that keeps me oriented and putting my primary focus on my home. But that can look different for different people.
Yes, but make no mistake about it, the primary place is the home first.
The focus is the home first. And so, it's the kids first, it's your husband first, which I don't think should be a very controversial point, but for many people it is. So anyways, those are some thoughts about Eve in exile. Alicia Moss says, my daughter asked the question the other day, is it unbiblical to choose not to have children? I'm glad to hear it addressed. I appreciate that Rebecca Merkel is willing to have the conversation about things that are along these lines. I don't hear a lot of people addressing this. So
I also think that, you don't have to agree with her on everything. You don't have to agree with Doug Wilson on everything. And there's a way that we can take the nuggets or the pieces that we do agree with and, contemplate those things, or, things that we might be on the fence about. We can say, okay, well, that's one perspective, and then hear another perspective, and, make informed biblical decisions.
Now, one thing I'd like to ask you about, in you living overseas in Africa, do you think that Rebecca Merkel's vision for womanhood is uniquely American?
No.
Does it?
No, I don't.
Or affluent, like this is only for rich white women. No. Like talk to me a little bit.
I have seen women in shacks who literally make their shack the focal point. They might go out and clean houses in the day, and their husband goes out to work, but literally they live like in a shack in Kayamandi or in Khayelitsha in South Africa. And when they come home, their shack is very neat, in order. The woman's main concern is her husband and her children. That is just.
So it didn't strike you as a message for affluent people.
Nope. I've seen it in like Jamestown, which is like a middle class area, and where both parents might work. But see, things are a little different in South Africa. So usually in South Africa, people get off work early enough so that the entire family can come home and have dinner together. It is a value there. People aren't working until 7:00 at night. People get off work usually around 4:30. If their kids are in after school care, they're able to pick their kids up. And then they come home and wives make dinner. They generally make their husbands a cup of tea, and then they start their evening routine. And men definitely help out. It's not just like the husband goes and puts his feet up while the wife just does all this. But it's definitely, one, a partnership, but two, making the house a home is,
which I think is Merkel's point.
Yeah, it's what a woman does in my travels in like South Africa and Zambia. And I've seen it among, the affluent in South Africa. I've been in some very affluent places, and I've been in shacks. It doesn't strike me like what she was saying didn't strike me as this is a white, this is only for the white American woman, and you have to have, your $100,000 plus not home, but income, in order to make this work.
Okay. I was curious about. All right, friends, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back next week with another live show. It'll be July 2nd. I can't believe the year's half over.
Yes.
All right. Take care. Good night, and God bless.